Hello, happy Saturday. Welcome to Everything's Energy. I'm here with the weekly astrology forecast for the week of tomorrow, July 12th through next Saturday, July 18th. The overarching theme here is in the title, returning to what sustains us. And this week really brings us into the heart of Cancer season. We also have the Cancer new moon on July 14th. And we've had months of really extraordinary planetary movement. All the outer planets have changed signs. Jupiter recently entered Leo, Chiron recently entered Taurus. But I think this week Cancer is inviting a very simple question for us. What sustains? Not what impresses others, not what keeps us busy, not what we believe we should want or should do, but what actually nourishes you. What really helps you to feel grounded and rooted and maybe even just gives a sense of belonging. So, these questions feel really poignant right now because this week also gives some significant aspects involving outer planets. We have Uranus sextiling Neptune in the middle of the week, and we also have Uranus trining Pluto at the end of this week. And as outer planets are subtle energy, they're very slow moving. These are collective aspects, right? And they speak to some larger transformation that's happening, both within us, but absolutely it's happening around us. So I think that's probably the deeper wisdom of the week. As the outer world is changing, we're being invited to rediscover what is essential for us, ourselves. And the idea is that, maybe things pick up speed or maybe the future starts to begin to evolve in front of us, but we still really need some space and some place in Cancer's energy to feel that we can be rooted and to feel that we can be nourished. So let's start with what's going on Sunday, July 12th. We have the Sun conjunct Mercury. And, that's about illuminating the inner story. The Sun and Mercury are meeting in the sign of Cancer. And because Mercury is retrograde, this conjunction has a distinctly kind of reflective quality about it. Mercury retrograde often brings us back, reminds us, invites us to review and revise old memories, old places, old ideas, old thought forms, old conversations. And in Cancer, the territory that is covering is particularly personal. So, the Sun illuminates whatever Mercury's has been reviewing, essentially. And so during this conjunction around the time of Sunday, maybe something becomes clearer, or maybe it's just that, there's an opportunity for us to understand a past experience in a different way, or even recognize, a pattern. If Mercury is about communication, communication absolutely has patterns. Maybe it's a pattern that's repeating or a conversation that is well to revisit. It's a really wonderful day I would offer for reflection and journaling and really listening to the truth beneath the surface. And, Cancer reminds us that memory isn't only about the past, that memory helps us understand what would serve us well in this moment now. So, on Sunday, the question might be, what is my inner life trying to help me remember? Let's get to Monday, July 13th. There's Uranus is active here, so I'm going to use the word disruption as is one of the words I use about Uranus. But also there's this interesting play of maybe some disillusionment or seeing beyond the illusion and delusion and into a deeper truth. So this isn't a scary day. It's the most complex day of the week, in my view of it. That's my offering. A Venus is in Virgo and she's making three challenging aspects: Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So this is really cool because all those outer planets are in that minor triangle, right? And I spoke last week about Venus entering into Virgo and what that means. And so this is, it's a really fascinating energetic because it's like this kind of tension for our desire for order and well-being, but also the larger forces of change that are afoot and that I think on many levels we are also welcoming. So Venus is squaring Uranus first around 10:30 in the morning. Venus in Virgo, Uranus in Gemini. And so Venus is going to value that kind of consistency and care and discernment and the small acts, the details that really show how we feel. But Uranus and Gemini might want freedom and innovation and movement and possibilities. And by definition, a square creates some friction for some revelation to get us to higher ground. So we may suddenly become aware that something in the wheelhouse of Venus, finances, relationships, justice, balance, or even our creative lives and our routines, something might be up for change. Maybe there's a routine that once supported us that feels rather old or outdated or restrictive. Maybe there's a relationship dynamic that would do well to have more space so as to expand. But maybe there's also an unexpected, kind of financial situation that is inviting us to become more flexible, or a creative project that wants to move in a direction that we may not have anticipated. Uranus reminds us that we are the change, that we are the high technology that we seek. And while it can be disruptive, as I was saying, the deeper purpose, it's not disruption for chaos. It's disruption for liberation. And that's a very, very, very different path. So the question isn't how do I preserve everything exactly as it has been? It's really about, what needs greater freedom in order to evolve at this point in our world and in our lives. A couple hours after that, just before 1 o'clock, Venus is quincunx to Neptune. So this might blur the sense of what we want because Neptune is a little bit foggy. It's about seeing through some things that might have been behind the curtain, seeing beyond the illusion and delusion. But that's interesting because Venus in Virgo very clearly wants discernment. It wants clarity. But Neptune dissolves boundaries. So we may find ourselves idealizing something, a situation, a possibility, an individual, or even just a collective sense of balance, becoming, becoming temporarily unsure of what's actually there. And it's a subtle aspect, quincunx, but I think the sequence here today also matters. Because first we have in the day Uranus is disrupting something. And then kind of in the middle of the day, we have Neptune making this picture a little bit less clear, at least momentarily. And so all that means is that, you know, middle of the day is not necessarily the time to rush toward conclusions, to, if we feel a little bit uncertain, to really try to nail it down. It's about allowing the uncertainty and allowing the dust to settle and trusting in the process. I think as humans, it's probably pretty challenging for all of us in our own ways to live through times of transformation. We each have our own buttons that get pushed when we're moving through a space of change. And however much this touches on us individually, it's absolutely in the collective. So I just kind of want to say one more thing about this aspect, and that's that there's kind of this difference between our intuition and our projection. And I get this question a lot when I'm doing readings for people. I think, how do I know if it's my intuition? I thought I got a hit on something. And intuition and projection are very different things, right? And one of the easiest ways is time and space, because sometimes time is there to help us understand which one we're experiencing. So let's get to the kind of the close of the day, and that's just around 5 p.m. We have Venus quincunx Pluto. So Venus was earlier in the day quincunx to Neptune, now quincunx Pluto. Quincunx is a need for a slight adjustment. It can be a challenging aspect, a slight challenge. But Pluto and Aquarius, this is the deeper layer, I think, that's emerging. Pluto really wants us to dive deep and to be willing to look beneath the surface at, at a couple things. What's really motivating us? What might we be attached to? And to look at those attachments. Because, really, I guess I'll reframe this. Attachment is fine, but when we're talking about control and fear and worthiness and the power of influencing others, those are very different things than maybe healthy attachment, right? So what are we, maybe if there's anything we're clinging on to because we're feeling a little bit nervous, this is what Pluto wants us to look at. And I think if we take it again, take the big picture of this day, that it's Venus in all three aspects with all three transpersonal planets. And I think one of the words that's coming to mind is recalibration. It's, and so, recalibration around balance and harmony and justice, values and money and love and creativity and care. And because Venus is in Virgo, this is about the way we organize our moment to moment. And Uranus is asking what needs to change. Neptune is asking what is real. And Pluto is asking what is true beneath the surface. So I would just say on Monday, it's a really good day for observation versus reaction. And so after that, let's get to Tuesday, because Tuesday we have a beautiful new moon. So if Monday felt a little bit scary, I kind of feel like I like to say things as they are, but I hope they don't unnerve you. I think it's more to just say it's okay. It's part of the process of transformation is realizing that we are the microcosm to the macrocosm. So by definition, if the collective is going through something, even if we're not aware all the time that there might be a thread within us that we're still carrying, and the easiest way to make a shift is we can't control others, we can control us, right? So the Tuesday Cancer new moon is a little bit of a wonderful balm. Um, but before I get to that, I want to say, at 1 a.m., before the new moon is exact, we have Mercury semi-square to Venus. So this is bringing a little bit more tension. And this is just kind of saying that the heart and the mind may not necessarily be speaking the same language. That's our dream time, 1 a.m. So maybe even take the dreams with a little bit of a grain of salt. Because, you know, if Mercury is in Cancer and it's conjunct this new moon, I'll get to that in the podcast. I have a whole podcast, as you guys know, for the new moon. But Mercury in Cancer was communicating through feeling and through memory and through emotional association. Excuse me. Venus in Virgo is asking practical questions. What can I do? Venus in Virgo is very detail oriented. What's actually going to help here? And what needs attention? And so there might be this kind of gap between emotional understanding and really craving that with Mercury and Cancer and just wanting to do something, practical solutions. And I think it's worth noting here that sometimes care is action, but sometimes care, as I'm going to use again, just simply listening, just simply pausing, just simply being present. And so after that happens, we arrive at what I feel is the heart of the week, and that is the Cancer new moon. And it's beginning a new cycle of themes of belonging and nourishment and emotional security and home in the bigger, the small but the bigger sense. Home, obviously where we hang our hat, but home, the collective home, this planet, this galaxy. So and Cancer is a water sign, but it's also a cardinal sign. Cardinal, feminine, water, ruled by the moon. So it doesn't only feel, It's very intuitive, but it's a cardinal sign, and cardinal signs are initiating signs. So this new moon might ask us to begin creating conditions that we need personally to feel deeply rooted. And, I feel like the new moon is especially important here because it's occurring within a period of just this kind of extraordinary collective transition. And as the world is going through transformation, the question of what constitutes home is profound, as I was mentioning. It might be the roof over your head, but it might be a garden, it might be a spiritual practice, it might be a community, it might be a rhythm of life or a feeling that you have. So I'm just going to point you to, if you want more info on the Cancer new moon, I just put out a podcast about that. Apologies for the barking dog. I'll just say for right now, one of the questions on Tuesday might be, what am I ready to create that'll really sustain me in the season ahead? Let's get to Wednesday, July 15th. This is really a day where I sense the future is going to begin to take shape. This is a day where Uranus is highly active. Around 12:30 in the morning, Mercury is going to be semi-square to Uranus. Mercury's still retrograde in Cancer. So semi-square Uranus and Gemini, there might be some kind of mental restlessness or this sense of old ideas, Mercury reviewing in Cancer, the emotionality of stuff, combining with new ideas. Uranus, the future, the lightning bolt of change, the revolution, the liberation. We are the change. So, but it also might just mean that like unexpected downloads, unexpected information, we may suddenly understand something, potentially something from our past because of the retrogradation, from an entirely different perspective, because that is the nature of Uranus, right? And so because Mercury's retrograde, I would pay particular attention to old ideas that return in a new form. So this notion that something you once considered may make sense all of a sudden, or something from the past may light up and become a seed for the future. In the afternoon on the same day, we have Uranus sextiling Neptune. That's around 4:30 in the afternoon. This is one of the most significant collective aspects of the week because this is where Uranus has been sextiling Neptune for many, many months and will continue because they are moving slowly. It's exact this week. And so this is pretty cool because, both planets are newly in their signs, as we know, and they're both helping to create this new world that we're moving into. And so while Uranus is reminding us that we are the change, we are the high technology, awakening, disruption, innovation, liberation, as I was saying. Neptune is about our imagination. It's about our spirituality. It's about our ideals, our collective mythology, but also the disillusion of old boundaries. So this is a really cool aspect because the sextile is absolutely a harmonious flow. So on this day, especially, this is another one of the balms of the week. You know, this is going to be a time that these planets can support extraordinary shifts in our imagination, in our willingness to see beyond those, beyond the illusion and delusion, beyond those things that we feel maybe are just so entrenched, and how is it going to work out, right? There's also this, even though I say Uranus reminds us that we are the high technology, there's also the aspect of new technologies with Uranus that's absolutely part of the 3D world. So, new tech might continue to change how we communicate, also how we understand our world, our reality. But because Neptune is here, this is equally about new spiritual and philosophical movements. And I think that's really cool to have both of those activated because that also seems like a nice antidote for some of the nervousness that some of the tech might be causing. So, What might happen around this time is old cultural narratives may begin dissolving because there's entirely new possibilities that are starting to enter into the collective consciousness. And the relationship between technology and consciousness, I want to just put a pin in, feels especially important here because we are the high technology. What our consciousness imagines, what our consciousness focuses on is what we create. Period. End of sentence. So, and what we create changes what we're capable of imagining. So it's a little bit of a snowball effect here. And this day is potentially an apex of that energy, but this energy is so present for such a large portion of this year that it's just worth kind of looking at this week maybe and seeing if there's some themes that are coming up. Because, this is a long-term collective story. It's not something confined to a single Wednesday afternoon. But it's an important moment in this larger unfolding. So on a personal level, I would just say this week, pay attention to any unusual ideas, any creative inspiration. Um, Absolutely your dreams and also your intuition. Because the present moment is that we're experiencing now is a product of the past. And so we are creating the future right now. So the future begins also in the intuition and the imagination long before it becomes visible in the 3D world. I'm sure you've heard certain physicists and metaphysicists say that the 3D world is the last step. The energy is afoot well before. And that's really kind of one of the beautiful teachings, I think, of this sextile. So let's go on to Thursday. Spent quite a long time on Wednesday. I love Uranus, as I'm sure you guys know, and I love the outer planets and I love Neptune. So I just think that's a really cool aspect for us. Thursday is a day of more quiet alignment. We have the sun by quintile the north node around 1:30 in the afternoon. And this is a subtle aspect, but it can form some really nice creative alignments with who we are becoming and the direction that life is moving us. The north node is where we're headed. Why are souls here? But it doesn't have to mean that it's going to be a big thing. I'm talking about quiet alignment here because it might be a small aha, um, a conversation, an invitation, this kind of intuitive nudge. Something might just light up for us, or you might just sense that something falls into place. And by quintiles, just note that they often work through creativity and unusual solutions rather than obvious linear pathways. And if we're doing anything right now, we're getting off the conveyor belt, as I sometimes call it. We're not just marching in a linear space. Also, we don't need the complete plan that we're going to be reminded. We might simply need to recognize the next meaningful step. Keep going into Friday, July 17th. This is a day where devotion has really going to come into structure, and that's because Saturn's here. We have Venus biquintile Saturn. So everything I said about biquintiles working through creativity and unusual solutions and not necessarily linear is still operational. But now the players are Venus in Virgo and Saturn in Aries. So I really like this energy within the larger story of the week because, as we know, Venus in Virgo is asking us to tend to what we love, to what nourishes our soul and our heart. Saturn asks us to commit. And so together they remind us that, again, this word devotion is one that comes through for me with Venus and Virgo, but devotion also needs structure in the sense that, if something is important to you, as important to us, how do we make room for it in our lives? If we value our creativity or our health or a relationship, how do we tend to those things? How does that appear in our daily rhythm? Also, if we value taking time for ourselves or rest or being out in nature, have we actually made room for that? So Saturn is this planet of karma and not restriction, but maybe even reality check. Not in a bad way, but like What are you really doing if you really value that? But I also want to say, because Virgo is present and Saturn's present, this isn't about perfection. This is about making our values visible through the way that we structure our lives. So, one example might be that, love is absolutely a feeling, but love is also a practice that we can utilize or commit to. Let's close the week with Saturday, July 18th. There's some more transformation here, and I would offer that it's a day of deep transformation, and it's really about kind of the architecture of this new era that we're we're stepping into. So what's also really cool about this week, I mentioned that minor triangle that between Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, and it's been operational as in the they've been trining and sextiling each other. They move very, very, very slow. It's in this week that we have not just one, but two of these come exact. So the second one of these that comes exact is that on, today, Saturday, next Saturday, Uranus is trining Pluto. That trine is exact. That's just around 1 a.m. on Saturday morning. And this is another major aspect. So Uranus is in Gemini. Let's remember Pluto is in Aquarius. And both of these planets are associated with profound change. Uranus is the lightning bolt, the awakener, the reminding us that we are the change, but Pluto is the transformer. So if we're thinking about the collective world that we're living in, Uranus is going to disrupt anything that's stagnant, any systems in ourself, in our life, but in our collective that may be stagnant. Uranus is going to disrupt that. But Pluto is going to expose the deeper structures of power beneath them. And now they're both in air signs. Gemini and Aquarius are air signs. So that lets us know that this transformation is deeply connected with information, with communication, with networks, with community, also with media and technology and education. It's really the systems that ideas move through our collective, move through our society. So I think it's not at all surprising to consider that we're living through a really profound restructuring as to how humans communicate, how we organize ourselves. And I think it's important to remember that we're really still only at the beginning of this. These planets changing signs, as I've said, this is a once in a thousands and thousands of years experience. It's beyond, it's called a generational thing because nobody alive in this moment on the earth has any lived experience or lived memory with these energies. And we can look back to history, and I've done a couple podcasts on that as to what these themes are about. I'm not going to do that here, but I think it's important for us to remember that we're just at the start. And, one of the reasons why I think this Cancer new moon is so important this week is because the collective astrology is so enormous, it's so big, it's so beyond anything that we understand in theory. Cancer is asking us to come home, to come into this body, to come into the earth beneath our feet, right? And to root down and to remember the humanity of it all, to care for each other and to think about ourselves as a collective humanity and to nourish ourselves and to nourish our families and to nourish our communities and to really tend to the places and the spaces that we inhabit. And I think, to bring the layer of Uranus and Pluto, remember that technological advancement and social transformation don't mean as much if we lose our relationship to what really makes our life meaningful. that they're exciting when they support us in that, when they enhance that, right? So I guess I'll just say one more thing about this aspect, and that's, the future is still only just beginning to arrive, but I think we really still get to ask, what kind of a future do we want to belong to? What kind of a future do we want to co-create? Do we want to commit to being a vibrant and powerful co-creator with? So I'm going to wrap it all up here by just saying, there's a couple seemingly different stories that are afoot this week. The deeply personal Cancer new moon about tending our home, as in that means beyond our house, right? But tending our belonging, tending our nourishment. At the same time, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are all really active. And as if that them each changing signs already hasn't been enough, they're lighting up again this week. My dog Hamlet agrees with that a lot. Hang on here. Sorry about that. I wonder if noise cancellation will even just cancel that out. But back to what I was saying. Like there's a story of the Cancer new moon, which is this sense of home, this sense of nourishment, this sense of be here now, take care of what is present. And then there's all this outer planet activity being lit up, right? And then we're being reminded there's tremendous change happening. And I just kind of want to say that, perhaps these stories aren't separate. Perhaps they're right on time because the more the world is transforming, the more it becomes important for us to really put a touch point on what's genuinely nourishing, what genuinely sustains us, excuse me. And so, I'll just say that maybe this week is a reminder that the future isn't only about innovation, but it's about remembering. It's about remembering where we came from, remembering who we are, remembering how to care for each other, remembering what nourishes us, remembering our relationships with our own selves, with the land, with the earth, with our communities. And, you know, the outer planets are might maybe really kind of describing the architecture of this new era, but the Cancer new moon is really helping us to root down what life are we building that actually sustains us. So have a blessed week. I'm grateful for you. And check out the New Moon podcast and meditation. Bright blessings and so much love.